911 responders. What is a call that you will never forget? My first cardiac arrest call. An old lady had woken up to her husband not breathing. He'd passed at some point during the night it seems. But all I was given at the start of the call was that he wasn't breathing. So I launched into CPR instructions. They lived out of town. So it took the ambulance crew about 25 minutes to get out to them. There was nothing crazy about the call and I've dealt with way more traumatic calls in the 2 years since. But at some point during the call, she realized he was gone. And you could hear it in her voice. That shift in tone is what sticks with me. Car wreck. Late night heavily forested mountain road. Drunk woman flying down the highway. Lost control and flipped the car multiple times. We arrive and she's unconscious. Boarded and shipped. After about 45 minutes, we are gearing up to leave, is when we find the empty baby car seat. Took another 45 minutes to find the body. A life that had won. My friend got a call from a very cough sounding old lady that was absolutely furious because her neighbors had stolen her plants. When my friend asked her how she knew it was them, the woman said, because there's holes in my yard and she planted them in her ducking garden. I'm going to go take them back. I have a shovel and you probably won't get here in time to do anything about it. Thank goodness it was a slow day because my friend had to stay on the line for at least 15 minutes to convince her to wait for a cop to come by and talk to her neighbors for her. Used to work crime scenes and got a call for a suicide. This was my first outdoor decomp scene. The man had been outside dead for a couple days in the middle of August, but the day he was found was a rainy one. Because of that, there were maggots everywhere. His face was pretty much gone. His skin was slipping and everything was just sopping wet. I went to take his fingerprints and it all just sloughed off into my glove. I'll never forget that feeling mixed with hearing the maggots and smelling the decay. 4 of my 5 senses were experiencing disgusting sensations. Glad I didn't taste anything that day. Man called to report a male was breaking into his neighbor's vehicle across the street. A few minutes into the call the man came and started to break into the caller's vehicle. A few minutes later the man spotted my caller and broke into his house from the window. Spent 10 minutes listening to physical fight when I finally heard the police enter the house and say there's blood everywhere. Both intruder and caller died. Oh. And another 911 dispatcher had my caller's wife and kids on another line who were hiding upstairs and heard everything. I talked a lot of people who were shot / stabbed / beaten in the final moments of their lives, but you usually get them after the situation occurred. This caller was just trying to look out for his neighbor, and I spent a good 15 to 20 minutes bantering while waiting for officers to arrive and get the auto thief. Getting to joke around and get to know someone's personality before they violently die hit a lot different than taking a call after violence had occurred. Was an EMT before I became a nurse. Call came in for an MVC, motor vehicle collision, with 2 trapped. On arrival, cops said 2 young women, early 20s, drinking and going too fast, and flipped their car. Driver rejected. Then, we hear passenger screaming, "She's pregnant. Be careful. She's pregnant." Jaws hit the floor as the smell of alcohol on both them, and their car was overwhelming. We wanted to airlift the driver, but medic on scene said no. She had fractured literally almost every bone in her body. Open. Compound fracture of tibia / fibula, 2 bones lower leg and fractured femurs. Normal protocol didn't work because we can't pull traction on femur for the open fracture and can't mast pads because she has massive pelvic trauma / fractures with obvious internal bleeding signs and symptoms. Picking up her leg was like picking up jello. Had no substance to it, was shattered beyond belief. We transported both of them together and not sure how we kept driver alive. She obviously lost the baby. Miscarriage started in back of ambulance. Rushed her in for emergency surgery. If I remember, she broke both legs, pelvis, arms, clavicles, ribs, facial breaks, skull fractures, brain bleeds, spleen ruptured, bowel damaged, lost uterus and ovaries, and I don't even remember what else. First bad accident seen as an EMT. Will never forget that feeling of holding a leg with no bone left to hold it together. 18-year-old took methadone and attacked his mother with a knife. She locked herself in the bathroom and called 999. UK here. We turn up and the son is butt-ass naked climbing out the window in the front door, which head smashed. He gets taken to the ground and cuffed. Me and another manage to crawl through the window without cutting ourselves and find mother inside. Place is covered in blood smeared up the walls and every knife from the kitchen bloodied and discarded round the house. The adrenaline is just starting wear off as the paramedics arrive for mum, and as they're treating her, we go to the kitchen and find a dismembered member sat on the worktop. Turns out the kid had cut his own penis off after his mum locked herself in the bathroom. If you Google meow meow, slang name for methadone, one of the first results is an article about this call in Rolling Stone magazine. Although they say he was hanging out the bedroom window and he wasn't. But yeah, I will never forget holding a penis that was not attached to somebody. Not having to utter the words whose penis is this? Does he have a penis? And wait. Don't forget his penis. The ambulance almost left with him while we still had it in the house. I'm not a first responder, but a dentistry student. Dentistry professionals can work in the hospital as trauma surgeons of the face. This facial surgeon showed us a case of a man that didn't pay his drug dealers. They took it to an empty field and blew his face off with a shotgun and left. Surprisingly, the man survived and woke up half an hour later and called the police. They spent hours trying to pinpoint his exact locating, because at this point he was somewhere in the middle of an open field and obviously he didn't have eyes anymore to help them. He was taken to the hospital and his surgery took 18 hours, but he did survive. Edit. Today he lives in a rest home with a tube helping him breathe and another helping him eat. Volunteer firefighter in Europe. Some summers ago we were called as first responders to a motorcycle accident. When we arrived, the cyclist was obviously badly hurt after crashing in a car, but he was orientated and seemed okay. Ambulance and helicopter were on their way already, so we just had to stabilize him. Not a minute later he started deteriorating. Another minute later we started CPR. One of the arriving bystanders was a trauma surgeon and started helping immediately. Shortly after the doctor on the helicopter arrived, it was obvious that there was massive internal bleeding. They first tried to relieve pressure by puncturing, and then pretty soon decided that the only chance was to open him up. So they managed a clamshell thoracotomy in the middle of the street, and one started to give the heart direct compressions. The bleeding was massive, and they discovered that there was aortic rupture. The blood loss was too extreme, and he died there. Still to this day I have to drive slowly when I pass by that stretch of road. Harley motorcycle tipped over and the clutch lever went into a 4-year-old's eye. Parent was on the line asking what to do. Suddenly, she said, "They're going off the motorcycle." I emphatically told her to tell them to stop and wait for S&Ms. Rescue ended up cutting off the clutch lever and transporting the kid to hospital. She underwent surgery. That was 1982. Just last year, I met the lead rescue officer and the girl herself. Now fully grown. They wanted to meet the 911 operator that saved her vision. Someone called stating they had seen a man on a small island on the lake hours ago, but now the man was gone and his boat is still out there. An older woman called in a half hour later stating her husband had gone missing. He was last seen taking his boat out on the lake sometime overnight. The increasing tension in her voice as she noticed sheriff's deputies were already dredging the lake was something else. She was calm, but clearly actively dealing with the fact her husband was likely dead. They found his body not long after I hung up with her. Sometimes it's the people screaming that get to you. Sometimes it's the quiet acceptance of a horrible truth that stays with you longer. Memorial Day, 1989. FF/EMT at the time. Call dispatched as a car into a telephone pole. When we got there, I couldn't believe the carnage. A RHS student had been given a muscle car as a birthday present. The police later estimated he was going over 90 miles per hour when he hit the pole head on. Patient's right femur was about 6 inches long. His patella almost touching his pelvis. The entire long bone had compressed like an accordion. He had other multiple injuries. Took us 2 hours to cut him out of the car. The medics were pumping him so full of drugs To maintain his blood pressure they started to openly worry that they might duck his kidneys up. We finally got him out of the car, only time I've ever seen a kid used, on a gurney, and took off for the hospital. Medic had two large bore fourths going, and had a BP cuff wrapped around one of the bags to create his own rapid infuser. Apostrophe. The kid lived. He ended up losing the foot on the leg that was destroyed. And that leg, from what I heard months later, was more metal than flesh. The irony was that the kid was a New York State indoor track and field state champion runner. I remember odd things people say under stress. A girl's arm was ripped to shreds in a dog mauling. She kept using the word meat. There's shredded meat everywhere. And she continued to say it as she found pieces of her arm on the ground. Is that a piece of my meat? Exclamation mark. And hoo hoo hoo. OMG it's my meat. Exclamation mark. Some others. I brought you the asparagus. The asparagus. Exclamation mark. Guy who came back from the market to find his partner dead. Mon buddy. Don't do this. It's Valentine's Day. Homeless passerby who started CPR on a distraught woman's husband who collapsed at a gas pump. Little 4-year-old girl got ran over by her grandmother with a lawnmower that was on. It was not the gore or the blood that got me. It was the utter panic of the family and the way they broke down when the helicopter took off with her inside. Not a 911 responder, but I will never forget about hearing this one in my area. Student housing in the city center wasn't up to code. Someone left something burning in the clothing store below, and a huge fire broke out. One student was still inside and couldn't get out because there was no fire escape. Trapped, he called 911. She stayed with him till the end. This isn't mine, but a friend of mine fielded this call. An elderly gentleman called 911 to notify them that his wife had passed in her sleep, only it was like 7 o'clock at night. Apparently he just couldn't deal with it emotionally, so he got her dressed, took her out to the car, and drove around doing his errands for the day, watched some TV together, and then after 12 or so hours he finally sort of accepted that she was gone and called 911. A car accident where an elderly woman was sandwiched in the car and clinging on to life. I held her hand as she passed. Sometimes I still feel her hand squeeze. My friend is a first responder. He once got a call about a man that had fallen in the shower. He gets there and the guy is over 400 pounds and out cold on the bathroom floor. My friend, his partner and the guy's roommate try everything they can think of to get the guy on the stretcher. But the bathroom is tiny and they can't even roll him over. Eventually they call 2 more ambulances and finally get the guy out of the bathroom. They get to the elevator and it's too small to fit the guy on the stretcher. So 6 paramedics have to carry the guy down 5 flights of stairs. My friend called in sick for the rest of the week cause he was so sore and stiff. He couldn't move. A mother called because her kid pulled a pot of oil off the stove and it spilled on his face. She said she could see the skin peeling off his face. Speaking for my mom, who was a 911 dispatcher for a long time who used to let me sit in and listen to calls way back in the day, a little old lady called the non-emergency number and said yes. Hello, my name is. How's your day going? Wonderful. Glad to hear it. Well, I just opened my freezer and I found a human head. What should I do? I was maybe 8 at the time. My mom ripped my headset out of the computer and made me go to the break room. Turns out, little old lady had a grandson who had an argument with his friend, not sure over what, and he hacked his friend up with a machete, stuffed him in granny's freezer, and went on the run. I wasn't allowed to listen in on calls after that. Got a call for a 3-month-old baby that was not responsive, arrived on scene, and was a second person through the door right behind the senior fire officer, SFO. SFO immediately began doing CPR, and was therefore unable to take on role of incident commander. I quickly reached up and grabbed the radio off his side and assumed command and control. This happened several years ago, and I can still clearly see the child's face. That was a hard day knowing that there was literally nothing we could do but trying our darnedest to do whatever we could. We never did find out the cause of death, but it was suspected that the infant passed away from SIDS while taking a nap. Edited to explain SIDS. Sudden infant death syndrome. Infants suddenly stop breathing spontaneously while asleep. Not mine but my friend has an EMT, so his partner is always a paramedic. They arrive on scene and it's this old couple. The wife called saying her husband needs to go to the hospital, but the husband is refusing. Has dying of cancer and is already on hospice. He doesn't want to be poked and prodded in hospital when he knows there's nothing they can do to change his prognosis. My friend is packing up his bag in the old man's bedroom after the old man signed DAMA. The wife is arguing and yelling with the paramedic in the hallway about taking him. The old man gets out of bed and starts rummaging through his dresser. My friend isn't really watching him. Then bang. Old man shoots himself in the head right there. My friend just stands there now covered in blood and brains. His partner bolts outside, thinking the old man is going to shoot all of them, and the wife is screaming bloody murder. He had to take the next week off and go through mandatory counseling for a little bit, but has back at work. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.